I used to believe that plotting meant to lose the motivation to write a story before I could even get started. Every time I planned out all the beats and the whole story structure to the point, I would in the end look at the result and feel bored, as if there was nothing left to discover and the story had already been told. And I really didn't feel any spark anymore that made me want to continue and discover what's going on here. Without planning, at the midpoint I would usually crash into a huge plot hole and not know how to continue, and the story was dead. And that's why I have several novels resting in my drawer, rest in peace, and I will never finish them because I didn't outline at all, and I just started writing without a structure, and it didn't work either. I think a lot of writers live with this tension between chaos and order and organization, plotting and pantsing, and it's not easy to really find your own way here. So I call myself a recovering pantser. I'm somebody who still needs to discover the story and have that spark, that wow, I didn't expect that, or this is even more amazing than I could ever have planned it in the beginning. But I also understood that I needed some type of structure to continue and not have to rewrite the second part every time I start writing a manuscript. And the problem is that most plotting advice is not really made for people like me. It's made for plotters who like spreadsheets, who like to be very meticulous about every little beat and detail of the story. And that's something I will never be. So I understood that I had to find my own method, something that gives me the bones of the story without taking away the magic. I managed to find something that does work for me, something that really leaves enough room for discovery. And this is what I want to share in this video with you. Before I do any plotting, there's 3 things that I need to know. First one is the characters. You don't need to write down all the backstory and every little detail about them, but you should have a rough idea who is that main character, who are those main characters, what are their wishes, what are their deepest desires, and also what are their fears, what are they worried about, and maybe what are their wounds. With that, you'll already go a long way. You don't need to know every detail at this point. The second element is you need a core idea, like an element. What is the theme of your story? What's exciting you in the first place to write this? So for me, in this novel that I'm currently outlining, this dark fantasy novel, it's the theme of hunting. It's 2 hunters who are hunting each other. And the third thing is you do need a rough sense of the world. I mean, it depends. If you do write urban fantasy, there's maybe less for you to do here. But if you do write a full-fledged fantasy story with its own fantasy world, you should have a rough idea of what is the magic system, what are the rules for that. But you don't need to go down to every detail yet. Just keep it simple and outline the mechanics and the surroundings that are the most important. And I will also tell you about that in this plotting process, where I show you how I do a little bit of world building during plotting. Now, number 1, the first thing that I do when I start plotting is to write down what the characters want. I write down the main characters' names, maybe also the antagonist, and I write down what do they really want, what are their core desires. You can just do that as writing paragraphs, or you can just jot down words if you prefer that, or even do a mind map at this point. I prefer usually to just write in the flow and see what comes. You know you're done once you have their main desires and goals. And here it's important to know that the tension doesn't come from events that we're describing in a story. It comes from wants that are up against each other. So the main character probably wants something that is the opposite of what the antagonist wants. And these conflicts are what creates the tension that's really the emotional motor of the story. The next step is collecting. I love mind maps, so I just throw everything in there that comes to my mind. All the places, the locations I would like to include, topics and themes, maybe even tropes that I like, or maybe I have concrete scene ideas. I also write those down. And sometimes these are connected, then I just draw little lines between them, but you can organize your own brain dump, your own diagram, whatever you like. Depends if you're a very organized person or you just like to throw everything on the page like me. The important part here is that you do not try to edit already. Just write down everything and do not think about whether it fits or not. This is a creative collection. It's a creative process. It should be fun, especially for pantsers who like to be intuitive and just explore. So that's a step that I usually enjoy, and I try to make it as lighthearted as possible without any judgment, without any criticism. Once I feel like I've connected enough ideas, I organize them. I take sticky notes and I write each scene idea onto one of them, and then I spread them out on my idea board, my plot board as I call it, and I can already see a rough structure come to life here. The fun thing with sticky notes is that you can always decide to move a scene. Maybe you want to merge scene ideas that are too similar to each other. You can play around and just see what structure you prefer and what kind of scenes you want in your story. The more important part here is that I add these little sticky notes that are representing the characters. The green one is my main protagonist, the red one is the male love interest, and the blue one is the antagonist. And I add them to the scenes and write down what does the character want in this moment? What is their desire? What do they want to reach in this scene? And that way I always make sure that the scene is powered by the characters and not just, well, happening because I want it to happen. It should be properly motivated, and it's even better if there is conflicting interest and there's conflict in the scenes. As a reader, this is one of my biggest pet peeves, something that will lead to me not continuing reading that book if I do not know what the character wants in a scene or why they're acting like they're acting. If it doesn't feel like it's drawing me in anymore, I cannot connect to the character. And as readers, we can connect to the characters if we know what they want. This is really the most important thing. That's why I make sure to write it down. And once I'm done with the process, I have a plot board that I can hang above my desk to look at when I'm writing. And of course, you can make it look much more pretty than mine. You can add pictures of the characters, world images, whatever. Make it your own personal mood board. I might actually do this, but this is just the first draft that I did here. World building is a tricky one because I always felt that I needed to write down everything about the world before starting to write the story. And that can actually stop you from writing in the first place. So that's something I try to avoid. I keep my world building very minimal. I just write down and define what I need to know at this point. And I also use my plot board to do some very targeted, minimal world building. The blue post-its are my world building ideas. Since I have already an idea of the scenes that I want to be in the story, I can also know now what kind of location they would probably take place in. So I do write down and collect location ideas that I need to develop in my world building. That way I make sure that I build what actually is needed for the story and not just a lot of stuff and background lore that is cool, but that will probably never show up in the story at all. One last thing I do is I like to write the synopsis before I start writing the novel. Most writers really hate writing synopsis, me included. I hate it, but it's something you need if you want to apply to an agency or publishing company. So sooner or later, you're gonna have to do it. And I feel like it's much easier to do it before I actually wrote the whole manuscript and have all these complicated plot lines in my head when the story is still fresh and simple. Synopsis can help you stay on track with your story. You have written the whole thing down at least once. And if there is anything that doesn't work out, you might already feel weird about it when you write it down in a synopsis. You might think, maybe this doesn't make sense, the motivation of this character needs to be changed, or I need to modify this plot line. And it's good to know this before you put in all the effort and all the work to write your whole manuscript. Before I go, one side note for the people who are not so used to plotting yet and who have issues with finding a structure for their own plot. Maybe you would like to look at some of the plot methods, like Save the Cat, for example. Save the Cat comes actually from screenwriting, and it's really simple. It lines up all the beats and how they would be in a classic story, in a classic movie story. But I think that plotting has to be this annoying and boring process, and it doesn't have to strip away all the discovery fun of writing. For me, this method with the sticky notes works quite well, since I have the bones of my story and I can build everything else around it while I'm writing. And if you're a pantser who gets stuck at a midpoint, maybe you want to try out this method as well and let me know if it works for you.